Yeah, my name is Rand and I'm a drunk. Oh, wrong meeting. I actually said that this morning in a meeting. I am an alcoholic. I've been sober for over 10 years now, thank the Lord. So, yeah, I wrote a book. Now, I've spoken here before, twice I think, and about my brother and I, Ron, hiking the Appalachian Trail, and in 2018 it was precipitated by his wife's death, and I had no idea I was going to write a book about it. I took a lot of pictures, so I thank the church for this opportunity to talk to you again. I am going to do it different than I did before, because before I romanticized it. There's 500 pictures in this book, and I took about 5,000. And the last two times I showed you the pictures and the beauty and the, God works in magnificent ways in nature, and so I presented that pretty well. But now I'm going to look at the dark side of it and how hard it was and dangerous and all of that. So the book is called A Spiritual Passage, the true story of two brothers in their 70s tackling the Appalachian Trail while facing personal demons and strengthening their faith along the way. And that's really, we had no idea that's what we were going to be doing, but a little backstory. Next picture. I love this picture of the raptors. And what we were doing is seeking. I could sit there for hours and watch them, but I had to hike another 10 miles, so can't sit around too long. But it's just the idea of being free and be able to go where you want. And my brother and I grew up in Adams, New York. It's a very rural, small town in way upstate New York, almost into Canada. And when I was around 5 years old, I realized I was screwed. I came to the perception that we were different. It was a very poor village, and we were the poorest of the poor. My dad was a Mustang pilot during World War II and married my mom. Got polio when he was 27. It killed two of his cousins the same day they got it. Something in our DNA made us very susceptible to polio. My dad made it to the hospital, was in the hospital for a year, paralyzed from the neck down. He was in an iron lung for 8 months. Wow. In a barrel. Can you imagine? I had no idea growing up. He managed to he was paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of his life. And he was a very hardworking man, but with that tragedy and some other tragedies, we were very poor, and I had a huge resentment. I hated being poor, and I couldn't wait I just wanted to leave. I ran away from home in New Old Times, but somehow I always managed to make it back by dinner time. And now the funny part is that Ron, we went to the Baptist church. We were, indoctrinated, so to speak. Ron ate it up. Very spiritual person his whole life. And I was the opposite. I could not understand a loving God and then a punishing God. I felt like we were punished. And so I got the attitude that if there was a God, I didn't think he knew what he was doing. And of course, if you don't believe in a higher power, then you think you're God, right? It took me a long time to realize if I don't believe in something greater than myself, I must think I'm God. So, Ron and I both went off to war. Ron enlisted in the Army. He was a machine gunner in Vietnam. I enlisted in the Marine Corps. I was assigned to the 1st Marines. This is the only picture I have of us in Vietnam. We had just gotten off a helicopter. Ron had taken his gear off. I still got most of mine on. I think I was headed back to the 1st Marines, which was in the northern part of Vietnam. We both saw quite a bit of nasty stuff, really nasty stuff. And but we both made it out alive and pretty much intact. I had a lot of, I didn't know it, but my whole adult life I had a lot of nightmares from my military experience, and I do write about that some in the book. The way the book is laid out, my brother and I both kept journals. So we do a chapter on what we did for a couple of days, 2, 3, 4 days, where we went from where to where and what happened, and a lot of interesting, crazy stuff would happen day to day. And then every other chapter is something about some of Ron's experiences, mostly spiritual type things. And then my whole recovery program is laid out in there. Without identifying the recovery program, because in the recovery program I'm in, that's one of the things you do not do, because if you go back out, you are harming the program and you are hurting other people. And unfortunately that does happen. I had a major relapse for a while because I wasn't right-sized. I wasn't going to do the God thing. That was really a bad idea for a guy like me. So Ron came back from the war. Well, I came back first. I was a second lieutenant. They made me, I was enlisted, and the last couple of months I was in Vietnam, they made me a second lieutenant because they were in short supply. They were right at the front of it. And then when I left, they said, well, you can be a corporal or you can go to OCS. So I ended up going to OCS and I became an officer, and I spent 3 more years in the Marine Corps, and I ended up being a JAG officer, which is really pretty weird. Probably the last officer in the United States Marine Corps that did not have a college degree, certainly didn't have a law degree, and ended up being an officer and then a JAG officer. I found that out 50 years later, roughly. So we came back. My brother comes back, and the next thing that I know, he's riding around in a convertible with his hot chick wearing mini skirts and red cowboy boots, and they're going line dancing, and he is in heaven. And Edie had been married. She had 7 children. She was my mom's best friend, so she was older than Ron, about 15 years. And I don't know, it was just amazing. One night, in the nighttime we would be really tired from the hiking, but every once in a while we'd talk. One night Ron goes, the thing I loved about Edie the most was that every morning when she woke up, she was happy. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Where do you find a woman like that? But that's the way, I believe him. That's the kind of relationship they had. Ron was blessed with 7 stepchildren who loved him from pretty much the get-go. 27 grandchildren and 27 great-grandchildren. Because they got involved in the Church of Latter-day Saints, better known as Mormons. And Ron took to it like, a duck to water. He ended up being a bishop. He was the head of a church of like 200 people for, half a decade. And so he spent a lot of time helping people, on a spiritual path. And so when Edie she had a stroke 6 years before we hiked the trail. So in 2011, she had a massive stroke and never recovered from it. In fact, it got worse. But he never left her side. He never let anybody else come in and take care of her. He took care of her the whole time. Next slide. So that's the sunrise on the trail. I love these pictures. Kind of, a new beginning, right? A new day. Next slide, please. That's the first day. We were hiking. It starts at Springer Mountain, and you hike 2,200 miles if you make it the whole way to Catadin Mountain in Maine. We look pretty good there. Next slide, please. This is the second day. I love this picture because that's Ron, right? And he's in this it was an old shelter of some kind, probably for animals. But anyway, if you look at his face, I see, oh my God, what have I done? Are we really going to do this thing? Next. Tornadoes. This was 3 or 4 days in. We were crossing the road. There had been a lot of damage with tornadoes. Next slide, please. first 10 days it rained or snowed or fogged. That's a picture of me. Do I look happy? No. It was very hard. It was just incredibly hard. I have an artificial knee. My right leg is a half-inch shorter than my left. I probably won the award for the limpiest person to ever walk on the Appalachian Trail. As far as I went, we thought about quitting every day. Ron and I never said a word to each other about quitting for a while. Next slide. This picture was, when I saw that, I thought that was a bear. You see the bear? Mm-hmm. Up there looking at me, I go, oh, it's a log. But at the end of my drinking, I could barely stand myself. I've been married four times, right? I've done a lot of good things, and I did a lot of things that I regret, that were shameful, that were immoral, that were sinful, almost always when I was drunk. If I was sober, I wouldn't do any of that stuff. I had a lot of difficulties. I changed my path 4 times, major changes in my life. I would always get drunk when I had something that was really difficult, and then I would just go and do something different. And it all worked out more or less, except for alcohol. Alcohol got me. And it really got me in my early 60s. I had the illusion of control because I had handled it. For many years, it was not really a problem. I didn't drink more than I should. I didn't drive drunk. I didn't, But if you're a real alcoholic, over time, it will get you. Some people it gets really fast. The first time I drank at 13 years old, I knew it was going to be a problem because I just liked it so much. Here I am, a little skinny kid with, pimply face, clothes that other people have worn out, with patches on them, shoes with holes in the bottom, and I hate my life, right? And I drink alcohol that first time, and I'm Superman. I got a cape, I'm flying around, I'm 12 feet tall, I can do anything. That's how it affected me. And yet I knew, and I made it vow to myself that I would never ever do drugs. And I never did. Nothing. Because I knew. Alcohol gave me, why would I do anything else, right? But the problem with it is that if you're a real alcoholic, you do not metabolize alcohol like a normal person, right? I didn't know that. I thought I was a total miserable, immoral, sinner, just a bad person. And because I got into a situation where every cell in my body would scream for more and I couldn't stop. And that's what alcohol, we know now that alcoholics metabolize alcohol differently than normal people. We just do. And so that's where that thirsty thing comes from, where you can't stop. And you can go for days and say, why am I doing this? But you can't stop. Dr. Silkworth was a pretty famous doctor back in the 30s. And he ran a drunk tank in New York City called Towns Hospital, which is where the founder of the program I'm in, when got sober, had a spiritual experience, unbelievable, where he was not a spiritual man. God told him, I'm going to take the obsession away from you, but you got to go help other drunks. And that's what he ended up doing. And Dr. Silkworth was astonished because he had worked over decades with tens of thousands of men, and he would get them dried out, and they would do all these types of things to make them better, and they would walk out, and he knew they were smart men, they were good men when they didn't drink, they loved their families, they had good jobs, they could do wonderful things, and they put alcohol in their body, and they just fell completely to pieces, and they couldn't stop, and nobody could understand it. And then this miracle happened with, the guy's name was Bill Wilson, and when that happened, Bill Wilson asked for the doctor to come and see him, and he said, something's changed in me, and the doctor said, yeah, I don't know what it is, but you better hang on to it. You better keep it, and that's what he did. In 1957, the American Medical Association added alcoholism as a definition of a disease. See, and that's what I didn't understand. It's a disease. in the program I'm in, we believe, and it's the only one that seems to work pretty regularly, is that you need to have a spiritual connection with a higher power in order to become free of alcohol. So, I don't know, this is like day 4 or 5. You know, you're way in the wilderness. We were in Georgia, climbing all these mountains, up and down, Came up the top of the mountain, and it was one of those gloomy days, and there that was. I took a picture. It says dream, right? We're living the dream. So, then next please. That's a typical bridge. That's probably a much deeper drop than you would think, and I needed a bridge from my disease. I needed a way to get across, and what happened to me was, this was a little over 10 years ago. I was on a terrible bender. I do write in the book, in some of the chapters, some of the things that I went through trying to not drink, okay? And it's brutal. So that's in there, but I also write mostly about the solution. I believe that God gave me one more chance. I'm giving you one more chance, mister. And I was in the middle of, I just wanted to die. I could not do it anymore. I was in terrible shape. I had been drinking for quite a few days. And I went and sat on a man's porch because the liquor store didn't open for 2.5 hours. And Billy Cook came out and saw me, sat next to me, and he said, I know you, you're just like me. Turned out he had 30 years sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. Took me to the hospital, spent the whole day with me there. He was going to go fishing. And I realized that he had come into the same program I had been in for 3.5 years. I just wasn't staying sober. I could stay sober 95 days for a while. I'm thinking, I'm doing great. But then I would go off and all heck would break loose. And Billy came in the same way, you know, that I would. He didn't believe in a higher power or any of that stuff. But then the old guys put their arms around him and said, you stay with us, kid, you'll be all right. And he was. And he helped hundreds of men. So, after he got me out of detox, I'm going to read some things from the book. So Billy takes me to a meeting, and we're sitting there, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to do. So what are you going to do now, loser? Oh, I know. I'll read the book again, and I'll go to more sessions maybe. Try a little harder. Yeah, that's what I'll do again. I was going to do the same crap I always did. Billy turned around and said quietly, you know, Rand, if I could have changed myself, well, I never would have walked through that door 30 years ago. Billy was pointing at the door. They had walked in a few minutes before. Rand's whole body shook. It felt like Billy was reading his mind. That was his dilemma. Rand did not want to change. Rand did want to change. He had been trying to change himself the whole time, doing his program totally without success. Suddenly he realized that if he was going to change, he had to do Billy's program instead. Rand turned to Billy and quietly said, I will do whatever you suggest I do. And he did. Not perfectly, sometimes confused, sometimes balking or not liking it a whole lot. But in the end, he did it all. But would it work? Could he stay sober? So this is a picture of us. The first sunny day was in April. And that's the three of us. Rick, the gentleman back, was Ron's stepson. They're incredibly close. And he hiked with us for the first 17 days. A lot of bears. I put this picture in here. I just love this picture. So I'm walking down a trail. I see these two cubs in the trail. And they run up a tree. Now, I've zoomed in on this a little bit to make the bears look. I wasn't that close to them. But I was only like 100 feet away. And they're in the tree, running up and down, and then, that's the best picture I took. And then my brain goes, there's got to be a mama around here somewhere. I wonder where she is. Boom! That's the tree, right? That's the same tree. They're right up there. She popped up. I'm right, like, 30 feet away from her. And she pops, thank God I wasn't between her and the tree, right? But she pops up, she looks up, sees the cubs, She looked at me. Wasn't quick enough. I didn't get that picture. And then she looks down the trail both ways. And then she looks at me again. We both knew everything was fine. And that's not the way it usually works out with bears. And I just walked away. But I just love this picture. So this is a section this is a section I just read. And the notation there was about being in a gap. When I hit my bottom, I was basically between mountains, right? Now I got a chance to start over again. I'm climbing another mountain. Next picture. I threw this picture in here because this is like 2 months later. I don't look like the same man, do I? We both lost about 30, 35 pounds. And this is kind of how I looked when I went in the hospital last time. I'm not the same man, right? So, what happened was, after that meeting that I just read about, Billy was standing out in the parking lot with me. Everybody had left. It's dark. And I look at him and say, well, what are you going to do? And he says, I want you to pray to God. I want you to pray that God you don't believe in. And I just looked at him like, Billy, or you will get drunk again. And I knew he was telling me the truth. And I said, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. We ended up in the parking lot saying the third step prayer, which is in our book. The third step is where we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand Him so we can stay sober. I added those last words. And we said that prayer. The prayer says, God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me from the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I may seek to help. Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life, may I do Thy will always. And Billy said, for a drunk like you, man, God's will is you don't drink alcohol. You don't drink alcohol. And then he told me some other prayers, and he told me to pray for other drunks. And I started doing that the next morning. That was 10 and a half years ago. I've been doing it every morning. And I did a whole bunch of other stuff. And I made a connection with a higher power. And I stayed sober that whole time. And I did not believe that it would work for a guy like me. I was convinced, but I was totally wrong. God works in mysterious ways. So Ron and I were dealing with a whole bunch of problems that we never told each other about. My toes were, I have hammer toes, so the knuckles were all worn off basically, and so every night my feet are totally bloody. Ron had shin splints and he had foot thing going on. He didn't say a word about that. I'm limp anyway, my knees were killing me. I mean, we were really, really struggling without telling each other. Then I got an infection. So I came out after 2 weeks. Heidi thought I broke my leg or something and was walking with a broken leg because that's how I am, right? And but I had an infection. The doctor gave me some antibiotics, and he didn't say not to go, so I went back and ran my heck for a couple more days, and it became, I was walking, by the afternoon, tears are just streaming down my eyes, and then usually we would, I would stiffen up. After we got done hiking for 8, 9 hours, 10, 11, 12 miles, up and down mountains and everything, I would sit down for a minute. I wouldn't be able to hardly move. And I finally, but usually what would happen was I'd get my tent, right? I had a little chair, and I'd sit in the chair, and I'd say some prayers and do some other things, and roll over, because I couldn't get up, onto my sleeping bag, and then sleeping in the morning. It was hard to get going, but I felt okay. The body can really heal pretty fast. But then it got to the point where I couldn't. It was horrible. So I told Ron I had to go home. So I drove back to Syracuse, went to the VA. They got me in right away. It turned out I was almost septic. I had infection in the blood. I had staph, cellulitis. I don't know, 3 or 4 different things. He said, quadrupled the antibiotics, said don't do anything for a week. And so I did that, went to my meetings a couple times a day, started hanging out with guys and, doing the program. And Ron was just, didn't know what to do. Ron struggled a lot. He went up to Virginia because the Smoky Mountains got a foot of snow, and that whole bunch of hikers got stranded in that. So Ron, this is a picture of Ron at Mount Rogers where the wild horses were. He's smiling, but you can kind of tell he was lonely, he was sad, he was just, didn't think we could do it, and almost quit. But I came back. He was happy to see me. We started it again, and I felt okay. It was still very hard, but the pain had pretty much gone away, and it was just the normal aches and pains. Okay, but we had another crisis. Ron had one of his spiritual experiences, I guess you would say. This is what the trail looks like. This is kind of like normal, right? But one morning, I woke up. It was on April 23rd, and I heard Ron crying. I mean, really. And we never cry, right? We're tough guys. We don't cry. But he was wailing away, and I got out of the tent. He got out. He's crying, and he's very upset. He says, I can't, Rand. I can't. Oh, God. I had a horrible night. So many nightmares. I miss my wife. Stop. I want to go home. Ron was crying uncontrollably, gasping for air. Both men were Vietnam combat veterans, tough men who did not often show their feelings. So this emotional outburst was extremely unusual. Ron, it's going to be okay. You just had a bad dream. It's not real, Ron said. I got him to sit down in a chair. I made him some hot cocoa. He didn't drink coffee. And we kept talking about it. Here, Ron, drink this. And Ron is still, I can't seem to calm him down. I'm sorry, Ron interrupted, irritated. I just can't do this anymore. I am so damn tired, and this is so hard, and I don't know. Defeated. Ron, all I'm asking or suggesting is that we just think about this for a minute. How you feel right now will pass. It was still dark. This is night terrors, right? What we have to ask ourselves is, if we quit now, are you going to regret it in a day or two? What would Edie say if she was here? I don't think she would tell you to quit. You didn't quit when she had the stroke and was so sick and unable to take care of herself for those 6 years. She knew you dreamed about doing this. This dream gave you focus and peace and a goal and something to look forward to after she passed. It's not a nightmare. It's just hard. We are tough guys. We can do this. Maybe and Ron used the F word. And I have never heard my brother swear. And I knew then that we were really in a bad place. So then I'm thinking, well, heck, I have been hoping for a long time that we would stop at some point. I thought 2 weeks max, right? 2 weeks. Now it's a month has gone by. I miss a few days. But because the whole idea that we could walk the whole Appalachian Trail just doesn't seem possible. Not two men in their 70s, for crying out loud. Me walking with a limp because one leg is shorter than the other, and the good one has an artificial knee. Seems impossible. But for our adventure to end this way, well, that just doesn't seem right either. So then I told Ron, let's just do our normal. Let's just do our normal thing. And then if you want to, in the morning when we meet, we'll just stop. And good news is, I will support you 100% on that. Hell, you can blame me. How about that? Everybody knows I can't hardly walk anyway. So what the heck, okay? Ron stopped pacing and looked at his brother. He took a deep breath and said gloomily, okay, I guess I can do that. Thereafter, they did their normal early morning routine and then split up, each driving their vehicle to the starting point for that day's hike. We always camped on the trail where a road crossed. That's how our vehicles would end up there. Not always, but most of the time. Rand spent the whole morning praying to the God he used to not believe in, that Ron would decide that they could quit, and that they would finally put this ridiculous idea behind them and go home once and for all. When they met midday at the halfway point, despite having fallen, Ron seemed to be much more content. he acted like nothing had happened. In fact, not another word was ever spoken about his torturous early morning emotional crisis. They didn't quit. Damn. Sometimes we wonder why God makes the path so hard to walk. Yeah, this was actually where that tornado had gone through, and what we were dealing with, climbing over and around through logs, and some of the trail had been worked on, but not all of it. So the next thing that Ron did that was very spiritual, I thought, he was, dealing with his grief with Edie and everything, and really struggling a lot. Very sad. I kind of know what that's about right now, and my own self again. And so he decided that he was going to wear 2 packs. One was going to be his regular pack that we wore every day, and the other one was going to be an imaginary pack, and he filled it up with rocks. And those rocks represented all of his, how do you describe it? All of his sins: pride, anger, lust, sloth, envy, greed, and gluttony. His character defects, perhaps. He would think about each one for a while as he hiked until he felt like he could chuck it. Then he would take off his fake pack and figuratively remove the maliciously infected rock that he had been dwelling on. And then he would leave it. And he'd walk away, hoping maybe somebody else would pick it up if they wanted it. And in the end of the day, his pretend pack was empty. He thought that was going to be good enough, but it didn't work. The next morning, the pack was there again. So he did the same thing again. And then the third day, Ron did it differently. He carried the same god-awful heavy pack, that's for sure. But as he thought about each disability, character defect, wrongful act, or dereliction, he asked for help. And when he took a rock out of the pack, he didn't just set it on the ground, he said a little prayer. Then he looked up, beseechingly, and said, "Dear God, you take it, please. It's too heavy for me. I can't carry it anymore. So if you can please take the weight of this stone away, make it a pebble maybe, I will try to do my part in the future, to be a better man, the one you want me to be." So that was a spiritual moment for Ron, and I can share with that too, because, I did this program, and I stayed sober. When I got through with it, I felt like I had a much stronger connection with a higher power. I struggled at times. Oh my God, there were some real close calls. But each time I asked God to help me, and he did. It took away the obsession, and eventually the obsession went away. When I humbly asked God to remove my shortcomings, that's one of the steps. Right after that, I began to feel like I was a different person. I knew I had become a different, and other people saw it too. And eventually I realized I can be the man that my higher power, the God, or if you're a Christian, Christ, wants you to be. We can do that. So that was, a revelation for sure. I have a full pack on there. This is up in Virginia. It's there's a lot of pinnacles and places like that. You take too many steps, you're gonna have to learn how to fly real fast. But just the beauty of that picture. But there were many moments where you feel like you're in a paradise that only a God can create to make such beauty and to be free and for men in their 70s to be hiking. And it did get easier at times, and fatigue was a real problem at the end of it, for sure. One night Ron and I were sitting around, and a lot of times we didn't talk very much, but because we were both so tired. But one time Ron says, "There's a lot of weird people out here, Rand, hiking this trail." And I go, "Ron, we're all weird." And Ron takes umbrage. He goes, "Rand, we're not weird. They're weird." I said, "Ron, no, we're weird. Normal people don't do this, okay? You have to be weird to do this." He said, "Okay, you're probably right." So another night, I was sitting there and thinking about, see what we got here. Oh, that was me being in the fog, and that's how I felt before I made a connection with a higher power. That's kind of why I stuck that picture in here. Sometimes we learn to trust God even when we're not sure where we've been, where we are, or where we're going. Next. Some more of the trail and how, rocky it is. So we do this deal. I love this picture because the flowers look like they're floating, right? Can you see that? You can't really see the stems or anything. For me, in my program, it talks about made a decision to turn our lives and our will over to the care of God. I always thought, well, if I do that, I'm just going to be like a sheep, right? A sheep herder with one of those crook things yanking me around. You can do this, do that. But in reality, what we do is we become free. We become free. We give our problems to God. We make God bigger. The bigger our problems are, the bigger we need to make God. My God in the beginning was just barely big enough. I knew something was helping me get through those rough days. But I swear to God, I was 51% don't drink, 49% want to drink, right? So I got this internal battle going on a lot. And then as I progressed in the program, if I make my God bigger, then why wouldn't I turn it over? Why don't I just say, here, you take it. I can't do it. Can't handle it anymore. You take it, please. And God does that. I talk to men about this all the time. Oh, Rand, I still want to drink. I know. Don't go away. Just keep going. Well, okay, when you get those days, you get on your knees and you say, God, I'm having a bad day. I need help. Boom, you take it. And he does. He'll take it enough. That's what I've learned. But I made my God bigger. My God today is the creator of the universe. So that's 15 billion years of wisdom, knowledge, and experience that I don't have. Right? I can't teach my dog geometry. I can't, right? I love my dog. My dog loves me. I take care of my dog. I'm like God to my dog, right? My dog, I take his water dish, I go over, I turn the thing, he's looking at me, go, how do you do that? All of a sudden there's water. And I said that. So that's kind of, but I can put up a whiteboard and I can start teaching my dog geometry and I can do it for 8 hours a day and he's going to sit there and go, what are we doing? I have no idea what you're talking about. That's the way my relationship is with God, right? I don't know how it works. I don't know how this stuff works. I have no clue. I don't need to know. I have faith because I know God loves me and I sure as heck love him or her or I don't. For me, because of my past prejudice, my God is just this massive, loving God. And I might throw in mercy, right? If you want to give him another, but that's it. There's no punishment. He loves me, and I love him, and he's running the show as much as he can. It's pretty complicated, but I don't need to know. All I have to have is have faith. Okay. All right. Kind of run out of time, and I wanted to make sure there was time enough for questions or comments. So one night, Ron and I were sitting around. Go to the next picture, please. See the hat? You can't really tell here, but this trail just goes right down, right? If you make a misstep and you're not paying attention, you can die. I actually came across a spot where it was very obvious, somebody had been walking around, the trail collapsed, and 20 feet down I see a bounce mark, and then I see another bounce mark, and then it disappeared right into the forest. And it was fresh. And I'm like, oh my God. And so I'm yelling, going down the trail. I finally went down, took off my pack and stuff, went down using my poles. It was really hard. I didn't find him. Long story short, I never found him. And then I had a devil of a time getting back up myself, right? It took me this went on for like an hour. And finally, when I had to go sideways and slowly got back and finally found the trail again, I got up there, went back, got my stuff, walked down another half a mile or so, and all of a sudden I see where they had come out. So thank God they somehow survived that. So I took this, for whatever reason, I put my hat on that stone, right? I took this picture. At the time, I had no idea. But then one night, I'm talking to Ron, do the next one. And that's the trail, by the way. You can't really see it in this one, but way up there, there's a white slash. That's the trail. Go to the next picture. That's the trail, right? See that white blaze mark?
Yeah.
Go to the next one. That's the trail, right? You got to walk. You can't really tell. It's 100 feet down there, right? If you fall, so my story to Ron was one night we're sitting there and they go, one night when they were both very tired, finishing their dinner and getting ready for bed, Rand told Ron that he was surprised at all the arguing taking place on the trail. Arguing, Ron said. What arguing? I don't know what you're talking about. Geez, I haven't heard any arguing. And then I say, usually a hiker's eye said that about what he is seeing in front of him to his brain, which then tells his feet where to step, Rand said. Most of the time, not a problem, right? We just hike along without even thinking about where to step. But then we come across a place where to put your feet gets a little tricky. You know, that's when it happens. Exasperated, Ron said, bro, what are you talking about? Well, every once in a while, arguing breaks out. It does? When? Where? Who? What? About what? Oh yeah, I say. Rand says, definitely, you can be walking along all cool and serene over rocks or on the edge of a cliff, and all of a sudden, right foot says to brain, this all happens in milliseconds, nope, not going to step there. Brain goes, just do it. Then the right foot yells, nope, not going to step there. Then the brain yells, as every part of your body starts seesawing around, left foot, you go there then, now. Left foot refuses also. No way, Jose. Ron stares at Rand speechless. Rand says, brain screams, why not? Then the left foot chimes in, cause you don't you remember artificial me? Left foot can no go there. Oops. Sorry, brain says, all apologetic. Now your left foot is shaking precipitously as the right foot staggers to a different spot, mostly in thin air. No, your brain screams again. Don't go there, you will get us all killed. We will surely plummet to our death. Yeah, that kind of arguing, Rand tells his brother, staring at him intently. Weird. Ron says, you are really weird, bro. What was really weird was that Rand was somehow staying sober on the trail. A couple more spiritual experiences real quick. I had another one. So we were in the Smokies. We went back to do the Smokies after the snow had melted, and the Smokies were just socked, and it was pure. You couldn't see anything. All you could see is the trail, maybe 20, 30 feet, and it would stay that way for days. We're carrying full packs at 70 miles, and I left from 40, and it's, 6,000 feet up in elevation, and over like 7 miles. It's very steep, right? Took me the whole day to get up there. Anyway, and Ron's coming the other way, and we're staying in different places. And then one afternoon, I couldn't stay at the shelter. The shelters were packed, right? 12-person shelter. There's 20 people in there. So at nighttime, they're all, right next to each other. I have issues. I have to go to the bathroom a lot. And then the other alternative was this tent underneath where the line is to hang your food for the bears can't get it. And I always found that kind of awkward. That I'm going to sleep under the food that the bears want, So I didn't do that. And so I looked at the map and I saw it said there was a gap called False Gap. I said, well, I'll go there. Because usually a gap is a low spot in the trail where it widens out. A lot of times you would find other people had put their tent and stuff. It was dusky, windy, and starting to rain very hard when Rand gave up trying to find shelter. Having no choice, he set up his tent so that it straddled the narrow rocky trail and anchored it with metal stakes in the grassy edge. Along both sides, he fell asleep fitfully in this precarious position. False Gap was probably from here to that wall wide, okay? Stony in the middle where the trail was, and then grass on each side. And straight down, hundreds of feet on both sides. and I pitched my tent there. I did it so that I could put the stakes in the grass. So that's where I am. Not good. He fell asleep fitfully in his precarious position until awoken in the middle of the night by horrific winds racing up at him from the valley to the south. There. This is not the spot, but it gives you the idea, right? I don't know if you can tell, but that's just like down. And the strong burst sounded and felt like deafening freight trains roaring up menacingly up the mountain, passing sometimes to the right or the left of Rand, but inevitably some careened directly toward him for a direct hit. It literally sounded like freight trains coming right up the mountain. His tent felt puny under the onslaught, as if it had become a body bag in which he would be blown off the mountain at any moment. I really was scared to death. Rand prayed for mercy, and if that didn't work, acceptance, i.e. that if it was God's plan that he should die that night, then so be it. But he really didn't want to perish. Later, Ron would ask him if he was holding on to the poles of the tent, and Rand said no, that he was praying and pushing down as hard as he could with his feet and hands on the stakes that was spread out like that, trying to, because if the stakes held, then I probably wouldn't blow off the mountain, is what I was thinking. Hoping that they held. Tent flapping uncontrollably slapped his body unmercifully. The nightmare didn't end until just before daybreak, when the gusts abated and the wind-driven freight trains stopped coming. Rand was amazed and relieved that he had survived. It felt like a miracle. He was filled with ecstatic gratitude. Later, they would learn there had been tornadoes reported in the area that night. Actually, a few hours later, my phone rang, which normally they didn't work, right? And normally we didn't keep them on, but I would turn mine on in the morning because I had a couple guys that would call me that I was sponsoring, right? So I was making sure they were all right. And one of the guys called me and he said, "Are you all right?" I said, "Yeah, I'm all right now." And he said, "Well, he was from Knoxville, one of my guys here." And he said, "Well, I've been watching the weather and it sounds like it was pretty bad." And he said, "There was actually apparently tornadoes." I said, "Well, I don't know about tornadoes, but it was bad." So anyway, and then maybe time for one more real quick. I want to do Ron's thing. So my brother, right here, here we go. My brother, this is probably one of the more spiritual moments that he had. This is what he saw.
Trail, and sometimes it comes to the point where, hey, I better do some house cleaning. And that was really life-changing event. So many times we go through the motions, but we really, life is busy out in the real world. We weren't in the real world. I mean, that is the original real world. It's not the world that we're used to living in. So you have so much time to think and reevaluate what you've done and where you're going.
Tell them about Father's Day. When you were thinking about Edie, we ran into Gene Anderson.
Oh, yeah.
And it was so dark and gloomy.
Yeah, really dark, gloomy day, and it came to a corner. I just got through talking to him. We were talking about how dark it was in the forest. I mean, it was total overcast. It was totally dark. In fact, you could have had a headlamp on. It was that dark. And so I was talking to Gene and Randy, and Gene was from the Appalachian Trail Conservatory. And Rand and Gene were hiking together that day, so I took off and turned the corner, and there was this bright light with a door in it. And I go, is that the light we go through when... And so I started to turn around, and I said, you never run from anything before, and you're going to run from this. And so I started walking towards it, and right through the door, you could see the white blaze, and it was so bright, I couldn't believe it. And he said, and it was Father's Day, and Edie always made it special, so I was taking that as a message from her. Walked through the light, turned around, it was gone.
It's just for you.
And if you see the picture in here, you'll see the door. And so it was just a very thin light. You can see the leaves behind the light. And that was a very spiritual experience.
So that's what he saw. That was the only light that whole day. So somehow, I'm sure, something created a little tiny hole. When you think about it. What are the odds? A little tiny hole, little tiny ray comes down right when my brother needs it. Right? So, anyway. Any question? We can turn the lights back on, whatever you want to do. Any questions or comments? We do have, I did get the book published. That's a miracle, right? My first book, there's 500 pages in it, or pictures in it. I'm selling them at cost. The hardcover is $45. They're on Amazon, but they're more expensive. And these are autographed. The paperback ones are $25. If you want a book and you can't pay it, you pay what you can. Donation, whatever you want to do. They're not helping anybody in a closet or in a box. So that's all I'm going to say about that. And you do have bookmarks we put out. So anyway, that's me. That's it.
Does anybody have any questions or anything for Rand?